Hello, my Bill 5000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Alright, we are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one is titled The Case of Brittanee Drexel, Solved Cold Case. That was almost a tongue twister. Alright, I got my cup of coffee. Go ahead and get your cup of coffee. I'll give you a second. Yeah, that was long enough. Alright, go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, come up with someone special. Let's get let's get sad for all the wrong reasons. That's just how he goes. All right, let's get into it.
These are amongst the final images of Brittanee Drexel, who, in 2009, suddenly vanished while on a short holiday with friends. There is nothing worse than losing a loved one, but with no solid lead over Brittanee's demise for more than an entire decade, this story is one of anguish and patience. That would be until 13 years later, when fresh evidence would suddenly burst this cold case open at the seams. Good morning, good afternoon, or good...
Did he say 13 years later? Nearly 13 years later? That's awful. I mean, it's amazing because some cases just don't ever get solved. So, but 13 years not knowing. It already starts.
Good evening. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to another video by Coffeehouse Crime. Today we're looking at the almost solved disappearance of Brittanee Drexel. Brittanee was...
Did he say almost solved disappearance of Brittanee Drexel? Almost solved?
a young woman who, during spring break, vanished in the space of just 10 minutes. But who exactly was she? What happened to her? And who was at fault? Let's find out together. Apologies in advance, folks, but I've been struggling with COVID all week now, so this case and my performance is a little rough around the edges. I hope you don't mind. And now, with that said, let's begin today's video.
We don't mind a bit, bud. Yeah, we don't mind a bit.
Grab a coffee, pull up a seat, and sit back. This is the case of Brittanee Drexel. Although we're travelling to the state of New York, we won't be visiting the Big Apple in today's case. The state of New York may be best known for its main city, but it also has so much more to offer outside of its urban sprawl. The state borders onto Canada, in which it also shares Lake Erie and Lake Ontario with the country. So of course, also home to Hudson River, New York State is well known for its natural water formations. Today we head to the coast of Lake Ontario, and more specifically to the city of Rochester, a mid-sized city home to...
Right there, that got me. I'm sorry. Canada, eh? Don't you know? Yeah, I love Canada. I do. I do love Canada. You can punch a moose in the face and take shots of maple syrup all day. I'm sorry. I really do like Canada, though. They got some pretty land. A shit ton of snow.
over 1 million residents. Rochester is rich in both wealth and culture, home to many large companies such as Kodak, and home to 2 internationally renowned universities. And if we're talking culture, I don't think we can go without mentioning their local dish, affectionately dubbed the garbage plate. Fries, macaroni and beans, all topped with meat, chopped onions and various garnishes.
I mean, I
But
don't
hey,
sound bad.
I digress. Let's return...
I don't sound bad at all. I mean, I don't eat meat anymore, but I mean, if they had like one of those veggie scrambled meat substitute things, that would be freaking amazing. I'd eat it. I'd definitely eat it. Would.
our focus to today's case. In the county of Chile in Rochester,
I'm going to make me one of those. My way. It's going to be amazing.
we find ourselves zeroing in on the Drexel household. And here lived 17-year-old Brittanee Drexel. Brittanee was born on October the 7th, 1991, to her mother Dawn and father John. Dawn and John were only teenagers at the time of her birth, but they did their very best to raise Brittanee together. Saying that, they found that raising a child at such a young age put great strain on their relationship, and sadly the two ended up separating early into Brittanee's childhood. John unfortunately faded out of Dawn's and Brittanee's lives, but it didn't take long for Brittanee to regain a new father figure, as Dawn had once again found love. Chad Drexel was serving in the military at the time, and eventually he and Dawn would marry. Now, Chad had grown to love Brittanee like his own daughter, and upon marrying her mother, he officially adopted Brittanee with his surname. But Brittanee had her own troubles. Very early in her childhood, she developed persistent hyperplastic primary verrucous in her right eye, which therefore caused it to be hazy and scarred. This condition
That was a very big name. Never heard of it. That's awful. I mean, compared to what happens to her, probably not as nearly as bad, but you hate to hear stuff like that.
required several surgeries, and Brittanee ended up blind in that eye as a result.
Aww.
But despite going through the loss of her father and multiple medical procedures, she never let these hardships hold her back. She grew into an outgoing teenager who, despite her smaller stature, loved to play soccer. During her teenage years, Brittanee started to wear contact lenses in order to hide that her blind eye would often drift to the side. And using her own self-consciousness as her drive, Brittanee gained a passion for cosmetology. She aspired to help others with their self-consciousness, and wanted to become a model to show people of all types were beautiful, no matter what. And that's exactly what she was. A beautiful young woman surrounded by those who loved her. She had her family, a multitude of friends, and her boyfriend. Sadly, her family wouldn't stay together forever, and by the year 2008, Dawn and Chad had filed for divorce. Now, of course, the love for their children remained strong, but after their divorce, Brittanee's happiness began to noticeably slump, and unfortunately, her grades started to drop too. It's around this time that Brittanee's biological father, John, re-entered her life, and with more than a decade of time lost, they had a lot to catch up on. He would often fly over to Rochester to take her out to local restaurants, shopping malls, and events, and having an additional father figure in the picture really did seem to help Brittanee out. We're moving forward to spring of 2009. North America was beginning to warm up for the summer, and with that said, students across the nation were gearing up for spring break, with parties being organised all over the place. One of these parties was happening down in Myrtle Beach of South Carolina, and with many of her friends and boyfriend attending, Brittanee plucked up the courage and asked her mum if she'd
Been to Myrtle Beach. I'll never go again. Yeah, I'm not going to say why, but I will never go again. Don't even ask. Maybe one day.
she could go. Dawn wasn't sold on
Not go, but tell you.
the idea. With a lack of regulation, likely with alcohol and possibly even drugs, the answer was no, and Brittanee was clearly downtrodden by all of it. She therefore asked her mother for a compromise. How about going to a friend's house along the beaches of Lake Ontario instead? This idea was much closer to home and she would be supervised. Eventually, Dawn agreed.
Hey, it's compromises. People compromises. I like that.
She never really had to worry about Brittanee before, and being frank, she trusted her. So, on April the 22nd, 2009, Brittanee said goodbye to her mother as she got into her friend's car, supposedly only driving a few miles down the lake. But very little did her mother know that all of this was a sly ruse, as instead,
Dirty motherfucker. Damn. Straight up lied. Oh, that's some shit.
Brittanee and her friend began the long journey south to Myrtle Beach, over 800 miles away from home. And as Brittanee drove into the distance, Dawn couldn't help but feel that something was horribly wrong. Successfully completing the drive down to Myrtle Beach, Brittanee's journey south went by without any issue whatsoever. Her new friends appeared to be nice, but something seemed off about the girls there. She therefore decided to stick by one of her male friends, Peter Broshevitz. They spent their daytime on the beach playing volleyball, and at night, clubbing and partying ensued. But by April the 25th, the group were beginning to get grouchy. Brittanee had a small argument with the girls that she was staying with, so at around 8 PM that night, she decided to walk over to the Blue Resort Hotel where Peter was staying. Surveillance cameras captured Brittanee walking along South Ocean Road, located between her and Peter's hotels.
How the hell can you tell that? How can you tell that? It looks like a blob with legs.
And just a few minutes later, a second camera captured her walking into the Blue Water Hotel itself.
Okay.
The argument with her so-called friends seemed to be petty. She then received a text message from one of the girls that she was staying with, who demanded that she returned the shorts that she was borrowing. So reluctantly, Brittanee began to make the journey back to her own hotel at 8:45 p.m. And all while doing this, she texted her boyfriend, John. The two had been messaging each other all day, and although Brittanee was upset at her roommates, her mood and their conversation in general apparently seemed normal. That was until Brittanee suddenly turned silent. This was something that her boyfriend John found to be very unusual. She would always close off the conversation before heading out for a while, but this time, she just stopped texting back. John sent her several text messages, but she never replied. He then called her mobile phone. Still, no response. He even threatened to call her mother if she remained silent. A couple hours later, still nothing. Understandably, his concerns grew over the hours. He just knew something was wrong. He then texted the girls that she was staying with to see if they had seen her, but the answer was also no, and this was enough for John to take action. Surrendering Brittanee's plan to her mother was a very big move, but honestly, he felt like he had no choice. Her silence had gone on for way too long. And Dawn, she was distraught, but there was no time for hard feelings. Instead, she immediately called 911 to report her daughter, Brittanee, as missing. As police investigations began, Brittanee's mother Dawn and father John both flew down to Myrtle Beach to support the search for their missing daughter. Both local police and her family extensively covered Myrtle Beach, looking for any potential clue and asking if anyone had seen the missing 17-year-old girl. There were a few witnesses who suggested that she was at a bus stop and at a convenience store, but these leads proved to be fruitless. Abandoned buildings and dumpsters were searched, as were parks, lakes, and swamps. But despite their meticulous approach, nothing came to light. The only true lead that police managed to uncover was where Brittanee's phone had been on the day she disappeared. Not long after her last sighting, her phone would ping 7 miles south of Myrtle Beach on Surfside Beach. 2.5 hours later, it pinged yet again, this time 50 miles south of Myrtle Beach in a place called Georgetown. She seemed to be heading south, but after this, her phone would then switch off, never to turn on again. As a precautionary measure, police searched the homes of all known sex offenders in both Myrtle Beach and Georgetown, in hopes that they could generate some sort of lead.
In August, authorities searched a hotel room in Georgetown County, saying they were looking into a person of interest, but never revealing who that person was. But on Thursday, some new information is brought to light. Myrtle Beach police revealed this man, Raymond Moody, as a person of interest in the case.
But sadly, no dice. All potential leads were ultimately dropped. And when the area surrounding Georgetown was searched, including through wooded areas and bogs, again, nothing. There was no sign of Brittanee anywhere. Quite simply, she had vanished. Frustration is an understatement. As time crept by, the length of her disappearance turned from days, into weeks, into months, and then into years. There was no sign of Brittanee or a body. Regardless, both family and police were still ruthlessly determined to find her. There were many awareness campaigns. Telephone hotlines remained active, authorities gave rewards out to anyone with any potential information, and billboards were often raised. Dawn even travelled down to Myrtle Beach every few months to hold events, spread awareness.
It's the first time I noticed that. That tea kettle, right there, has steam coming off of it. I'm sorry, it's my ADHD, like it just went, I don't know. It intrigued me.
And give out flyers. She was understandably desperate for any new information. Dawn knew in the back of her heart that after 6 long years, there was little to no hope of finding her daughter alive. But she wanted to bring her home either way. Approaching the 7th year, and in great efforts to keep this investigation alive, Dawn actually moved down to South Carolina to keep this search up. But in June of 2016, one single lead would finally come to light. Although, it's not quite the lead that everyone was expecting. The lead came from Tuckwan Brown, an inmate who is currently doing time in the McCormick Correctional Institution on an unrelated charge of manslaughter. Taquan came forward to tell of a tale of how Timothy Deshawn Taylor, who was another inmate serving time for robbery, had sexually assaulted and killed Brittanee and about 10 other men. Taquan claimed that while still a free man, he travelled to a stash house to drop money off for Timothy's father. This was located in McClellanville, a town not too far from where Brittanee's phone last pinged. He claimed that while in this stash house, he witnessed Brittanee being assaulted, and when he left, she burst through the front door in an attempt to escape. She was then allegedly apprehended by Timothy and dragged back inside. Shortly after this, Taquan claimed to have heard 2 gunshots. When a story like this comes from a criminal without any coercion or benefit, one must wonder why they are only coming forward now, 7 years after the crime. Taquan's story continued to fail him when, 3 years later, he changed his story yet again. He then claimed to have seen Brittanee 2 more times after the day he previously claimed she was murdered. No witnesses or articles of evidence which supported Taquan's story would ever come to light. It was simply his word against Timothy's. So, was he weaponizing Brittanee's death over Timothy? Or had he confused her for another young woman? Timothy denied any involvement over Brittanee, and in fact, he claimed that he didn't even know Taquan. To add to this, both friends and family gave him matching alibis on the day of Brittanee's disappearance.
I may as well start with the obvious question. Did you kill Brittanee Drexel?
No, sir. I did not kill Brittanee Drexel.
Were you involved in the kidnapping of Brittanee Drexel?
No, sir, I was not.
Were you with Brittanee Drexel the night she disappeared in April of 2009?
No, sir. I was not with her.
Had you ever met her, or what did you know about her?
I never met her personally or physically. The only thing I've known is from what I've been seeing on TV and the bulletins and what the FBI has been telling me so far. So that's the only thing that I personally know about her.
And that would have been after the fact?
Yes, sir. That would have been after April of 2009.
So it turns out that this lead was all one big red herring. A red herring that distracted police and valuable time and resource. Either way, Taquan had now gained the reputation of a snitch, which I'm pretty sure doesn't go down well in prison. And once again, in the year
Snitches get stitches, bruh.
2019, the case would turn cold. With Brittanee's disappearance.
But, I mean, I get it. Like, ain't like they came to him and said, hey, you tell us who did it and we'll give you some sort of plea bargain. Was he asking for anything in return? I mean, what? Why? Was he just trying to make this other poor guy's life even worse than what it already had been? And that's shitty. Trying to either lay blame to someone else to see them get in more trouble, or just make up a lie to try to get yourself out of trouble by making a plea bargain of some sort. And it takes away from the actual investigation. I just hope none of what he said was true, because that's freaking awful, bud. That's awful.
Happening in the year 2009, it had now been 10 long years of not knowing what happened to her. That's 10 years of sleepless nights. Her family and friends wondering if they would ever see her again. 10 years of speculating if the person you love is still alive, and 10 years of wondering how they may have died. As we move forward into the current year of 2022, 13 years have passed since Brittanee's disappearance. At this stage, her family have all but lost hope in finding her. But that's when suddenly, in May of 2022, Brittanee's case finally made a breakthrough. This came in the old traditional form of a confession. The confession of a man named Raymond Moody. So where do we start with Raymond? In short, Raymond experienced a traumatic upbringing as a child. Surrounded by an alcoholic mother and violent father, he never had the opportunity to flourish in a happy home. As he entered adulthood, the young man moved out to California to join the military. 2 decades later, and he found himself to be a married man with 3 children. But Raymond's history takes a very dark turn from here, as, unfortunately, he was well known among the police force for multiple crimes in other states. Horrifically, Raymond Moody is a convicted sex offender. Back in 1983, and despite him looking after 3 children, he was convicted for sexually assaulting 3 unrelated children under the age of 14. But after being locked up, he only served half of his sentence, serving 21 years of its scheduled 42. He was released on parole in the year 2004. Disgusting monsters are very rare to learn their lesson. In 2008, he was again arrested for indecent exposure, being released shortly after this.
Do sex offenders ever really get reformed? Is that the right word, reformed? Do they? I mean, you offend people with the sex you have. Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Don't even get me started. No, don't get me started. I don't think they should be released. I don't. I'm sorry. If you can prove it without reasonable doubt that they are a legitimate sex offender, because I know someone out there is going to be like, well, not everybody is guilty of it. And I understand that. But if 100% yeah, they is, I don't think they should see the light of day no more. I don't. They offend people with the sex they have. That means the sex that they are having is offensive. They are a sex offender. That's just...
And after failing to register as a sex offender in 2009, he was once again convicted in 2010. Both in and out of prison more often than he changed his shirt, Raymond was a free man during the time that Brittanee disappeared. Now, interestingly, Raymond had always been a person of interest on this case. If you remember, police searched the homes of all known sex offenders around Myrtle Beach and Georgetown, and this included Raymond's property. But with no evidence of linking him to Brittanee's disappearance, he was cleared from being a suspect. However, fast forward 13 years to 2022, and the police had once again resumed their investigation of local sex offenders, which in turn led them to revisit the home of Raymond Moody. With the change in story, police now had growing suspicion that he had something to do with Brittanee, and after being charged with obstruction of justice, he was therefore detained for questioning. For one reason or another, and we aren't quite sure why yet, but Raymond felt it was only a matter of time before investigating officers found what they were looking for. And so, upon questioning, and after 13 long years of keeping a secret, he finally confessed to the murder of Brittanee Drexel. It turns out that on the day of her disappearance, and while Brittanee was walking back to her hotel, Raymond had forcefully kidnapped her against her will. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses or surveillance footage of this, but Raymond then drove her to an undisclosed location, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her to death. The very next day, he buried her body in the woodlands near his property in Georgetown. The last time her phone pinged was toward a cell tower nearby. Following his confession, police travelled to the location Raymond claimed that they could find Brittanee, and 4 feet underground they found what remained of her, a skull and several remaining bones. Forensics were able to identify Brittanee by comparing her dental records to the skull, and sadly, it was a confirmed match. As the news spread, the name and face of Brittanee's killer became public, and as his old victims put 2 and 2 together, old wounds would resurface. In fact, one of his previous victims, Carrie Harding, has since come forward to share her story with this evil monster. Carrie was only 8 years old when Raymond assaulted her. She was playing in a playground when she was abducted by him, and even in her young age, she thought she would never see her family again. I won't go into the details, but Carrie was given permission to go around the back of the car to use the bathroom, where she then noticed a green bumper sticker on his vehicle. The brave 8-year-old made a break for it and managed to run away from her attacker. Just as Raymond was about to grab her, she spotted a couple in the distance. 2 people who were just busily hiking in the area. Screaming for help, she ran into their arms, and meanwhile Raymond retreated and sped away. The only clue that helped identify and convict Raymond was the small green bumper sticker that Kerry remembered. Police knew that this was needed to get to the naval base found in town, and following 2 more undisclosed cases, Raymond was eventually sentenced to 42 years in prison. However, in a crime of justice, he only ended up serving 21 years. Raymond's closest friend, who actually ended up becoming his prison husband, was Ernie Merchant. And while the two had their own thing going on behind bars, he asked Raymond why he did these awful things. To which he replied, "I don't know why. I had the impulses and thoughts for a long time before I acted on them. I felt it building up in me until I couldn't control it anymore. And after this one, it got easier. I became someone else. Someone that didn't care." With this case being so recent, Raymond's trial is yet to be announced, at least at the time of this recording. But considering he has confessed to her murder and her remains have been found, it's safe to say that he'll be found guilty for these actions. A devastating note to this story, but if Raymond had been made to serve his full 42-year sentence, then Brittanee would probably still be alive to this day.
Yeah.
What is now important is that Brittanee and her family get the justice they deserve over the cruel, monstrous actions of Raymond Moody.
That's one thing that
I hate to hear that. That's so sad in so many ways. No, he should have served his full time. I'm sorry, he should have. I don't care what the reasons was for letting him out. I don't give 2 shits what the reasons was for letting him out. He should have stayed in there. He should have been there so long that when he got out, his ding dong didn't work no more. Even with Viagra. Matter of fact, they should just eunuch him. Straight up eunuch. Cut. So whatever. I mean, yeah, the family can now get closure. If he was in there, they would have to get closure for shit. No closure would be needed if he would have kept his ass in prison.
we're going to look forward to is to get justice for Brittanee. I want people to know out there that Brittanee's legacy is going to live on.
Again, the true tragedy to this case is that Brittanee would still be alive to this day if justice had thoroughly been served for his previous victims. Reformation is a possible thing, but how we judge whether one is ready to rejoin society or not, I don't know. In this case, being allowed to once again roam free resulted in the death of an innocent young woman. Raymond snuffed out a very bright...
Here's my thing. Evidently, that fool, that shitty mother, fought his urges for a very long time until he couldn't no more. So just because he's reformed for a short period of time, who's to say that those urges don't freaking come back 10 years down the line? He just can't fight them no more. You know what I mean? Cut off his wing wang and his cackleberries. Be done with it. Tell me what urge you feel now, mofo. You know what I mean?
light in April of 2009. The sick and momentary pleasure he desired, in return wreaked havoc and tragedy across an entire family for decades. There is no way to bring Brittanee back, so justice will never truly be served. But if I could have it my way, this man will never step foot outside of prison again. Brittanee had plenty...
Yeah, it's better if I had my way, because that man would never even be able to make it to the prison door. Just saying. He should be in there for the rest of his life. He should be put in some place where He's gonna have a lot of things shoved in his butt. I'm sorry, but he should. I don't even care. I don't think he even deserves to be inside of a prison. I think he deserves to be 6 foot underground. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know. Leave your comments down below. I know you will. But there's a lot more of you out there that think like me than you don't. I'm sorry. I don't think. I'm probably wrong. I know probably some sex offender out there is like, I haven't thump nothing. But like, man, this got me all kinds of stored up. Hold on, y'all. Okay. But even the man said himself, like, he fought those urges for a very long time until they just was so overwhelming he couldn't. Who's to say that just because you think this mofo is reformed, that he's going to stay reformed? What happens on that day where those urges just get too much and he does that all over again? And this time he's smarter because he knows how he got caught last time. Cut it off. Stitch it up. Shove it up his own boom. Stitch that up too. There's a lot of different things I could think of. But no. He's already been found guilty of it once before. He did it again and actually killed the poor girl. He doesn't deserve the breath that he breathes. I'm sorry. He don't.
To give to her friends, her family, and the rest of the world. And it's awful how unkindly, how unfairly, and how abruptly she was ripped away from all of it. I hope her family finds the peace they deserve in the years ahead. I'm calling it quits here, folks, as exhaustion is catching up with me. But thank you so much for watching another video today by Coffeehouse Crime. If you found this video interesting, or you learned something new,
Can't even say I enjoyed this video. And if this video made you as angry as it did me, leave a thumbs up. If you're a fan of the spooky, scary, strange, deranged things that just tear you up emotionally on the inside and just leave your brain into like a angry puddle of shit, think about subscribing because what we do. Alright. Oh my god. I'm sorry. Yeah. Alright, y'all. Be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. No. He'd never even make it to the jail. He would never make it to Remy. The only thing he would see is his maker 6 feet under. I don't know. I don't know.